MyCore is on a mission to be the world's most people-centric company. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the core of people. I'm your host, Nathan Bourne, and I invite you to join me as we deep dive into the personal and professional lives of our guests. We're going to learn who they are, why they exist, and what they do. We're going to hear their stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. In other words, we're going to talk to some really cool people. Welcome to the MyCore podcast. Hello. Welcome to the MyCore podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Bourne, and I'm here with Bekah George. Hello, Bekah.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
I am pumped that you're here. Also, here in the studio on a Friday, which is awesome. You were in the area.
I was, yeah.
Cool. You didn't just come here for me, obviously.
I mean, I would come here for you, though. I would. I absolutely would. Yeah, for sure. But I happened to be here.
You're
so
a big deal. I understand.
Yeah, whatever.
You were like, I'll be in the area.
I'll be in the area.
I'll have my people talk to your people.
It's been a process, for sure.
Well, we are here, and I am excited to have this conversation with you, this episode. By the way, this is episode 21.
Yes.
Conversation 021. And I want to, if it's okay, before we get into
Let's do it.
Your crazy, awesome, powerful story that I think our listeners will be on the edge of their seats, I want to take a moment and share with our listeners why this episode, the sheer fact that it's the 21st episode, matters. Is that okay if I do that?
For sure.
Cool. Let me take a sip of my little happy juice here. So when I started the MyCore podcast, it's probably almost a year ago, actually. It's probably about a year ago. And I didn't have aspirations of being like God's gift to podcasting or anything. And I got a lot else going on between running a company and having 5 children and all the things. I saw this clip and I was blown away. I'm like, no way. So fun fact, in the podcasting world, if you start a podcast and you do 21 episodes, the sheer fact that you published 21 episodes puts you in the top 1% of all podcasts on the planet.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Like how low of a bar that is?
Yeah, that's kind of sad, actually.
Yeah, right. So this is not really about how
people start and just jump ship.
They just jump ship. And I kind of get it, actually.
Oh, I can see it.
Having 21 episodes under my belt now, or this one, assuming, we complete it and publish it, right? Of course. Which is going to drop Monday, by the way.
Okay, awesome.
There's been moments, for sure, like even in the middle of the episode where I'm like, what am I doing with my life right now?
I can see that. Yeah, I can see it.
And yet at the same time, it's been such a cool experience to sit down, have these conversations, create this kind of fly on the wall experience for our listeners, to hear people's stories and to get to the core of who they are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I just wanted to take the liberty to not just pat myself on the shoulder, but thank
though.
Oh,
I mean, you really should. I mean, that's really badass. Like, seriously, think about it. Like, that's something to be proud of. You should be proud of yourself for that.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And it takes a village, right? Like it takes a team. So I just do this part, right? I hit the button, I do the thing, lights, camera, action. And then I have an amazing team, Kenya, who you've met, our chief brand officer. I mean, the copy that she writes, the titles,
she's amazing.
The short form. I mean, it's really top notch. And then, Tony, from an operational standpoint, makes sure that it goes through our SOP. And I can see why. Like a podcast is not that easy to do. Like it's not like the hardest thing in the world, but it's not just like jumping on a Zoom and hitting record. Like we had to choose like the setting and the lighting. And then you and I were having a little conversation about this. So we'll belabor it. But these mics are sick.
They're so hot. I've never said a mic is hot before in my life.
Well, it's funny because it's a hot mic. Have you ever heard that? You know what a hot mic is?
Yeah, for sure. But I've never said that.
Yeah,
so
it's probably good that the mic wasn't on earlier because I think we were being silly and, saying ridiculous
I don't know,
things.
real and authentic. Okay.
Right,
That's what we
real
like.
raw. So a hot mic, or more like a mic that's hot. So even down to like choosing the mic and getting the equipment, and then,
Yeah.
coordinating the guests and pre-production, production, post-production. So I can kind of see why you do 10 of them and go like, life takes over.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we're in the top 1%. No big deal.
I love
no
being
big deal.
21. I love it.
And that's what I
I'll
wanted
take it.
to just take note of, is that you are the 21st. You have put us over the edge. We are better than 99% of people podcasts.
I mean, that checks out for you. Top 1% makes
right
sense.
back at you. Right back at you. So enough about my core, enough about me. Let's talk about you, Bekah George, because you have an amazing story. You were at our event we put on in Columbia. I'm so glad you came and spoke at that event, and sort of had a keynote within my talk. And I mean, I just couldn't stop crying. Like, I don't know if could you see me?
I couldn't see you. No, okay. I didn't see you.
Yeah, they had to like remove. I just was like a little teenage girl the whole time crying.
I love that it touched you though. That's sweet. I love that.
It was intense. And I want to get into it because I know that you've worked really hard on yourself through an immense amount of trauma. And obviously, whatever you feel comfortable sharing in this setting, but I'd love to talk about it all. So maybe for our listeners, you could just frame out, and I will probably rudely interrupt you because I don't like to lose a thought. I'm like, whoa, wait, what did you just said? Like, you just dropped a bomb, like, let's talk about that. So I might not let you get it all out. But tell us about Bekah George and how you got to this point.
Yeah. So I'm a mental health therapist. That's kind of what I do. And I know you always say don't lead with what I do, but that's kind of like what I do. That's a bread and butter. It's a big part of who you are. It's a big part of who I am. I'm a mom. I have a 15-year-old daughter, so a single mom. I love Jesus. That's a big part of who I am.
You're like me. You were cursing Christian.
Cursing Christian. Yes, absolutely. So that's always a really loaded question, though, as far as like who I am. But I'm very passionate about shame. Shame is the biggest thing that I talk about. And I think that's one of the things that people shy away from speaking about. I talk a lot about shame because I have allowed shame to hold me back for many years to becoming who I know God created me to be and who I believe that I could be. But there was that voice in my head that said I couldn't be. And so for many, many years, I pretended to be something that I wasn't. And so now I travel around, talk about shame and how shame holds us back in many different ways. So, whether it's shame in the way you look, whether it's shame in, things that happened in the past, like all kinds of different things, right? So I talk a lot about how to get past shame and how to create new habits, new belief for yourself, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about that more because I know we're going to get through the full kind of story and timeline. I'd be curious, like if there were a way to read people's minds that are listening, what immediately comes to mind for them when they hear the word shame. I don't know why, and there's probably some reason for this, but when I hear the word shame, especially kind of through like the Christianese that I grew up around and the like biblical sort of brimstone and fire at times lens, I think of something that I did wrong, that I did bad. I was a bad boy. And now I'm like ashamed of it, right? Like, so I don't even know if those are the same words, shame and being ashamed. But help me understand what you mean. Cause you just said something about like, if you have shame around the way you look, and I'm like, but you can't really control that. I mean, you can within, and you have an amazing weight loss journey. How much weight have you lost?
152 pounds.
That's a person. You lost another person.
I lost a whole person.
You had a twin. That's incredible. You look amazing.
Thank you.
And you're still going.
I'm still going. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. And I know there's so much there.
Honestly,
well.
I could talk about shame when it comes to physical
Yeah,
appearance,
like what do you mean by
probably
that? Like
more
tell
than
me about
anything else.
shame. Yeah.
So, because I grew up overweight, I was like 250 pounds by the time I was in middle school. I graduated high school at over 300 pounds. My biggest, I was almost 340 pounds. And I've always been overweight, like I've always been very large person. I'm 5'9", right? Almost 5'10". And so I'm just a big girl in general. And being a woman, there's a certain belief in America, at least, I don't know other countries, but in America, you're supposed to be dainty, feminine, small. And that's taught to you from a young age, right? And so because I was taller than my peers, because I was bigger than my peers, I just got this idea that I am too big, like I'm too large, right? And so, growing up with that mentality that there's something wrong with me. So you said it perfectly of, I did something bad, but guilt is actually more of like, I did something bad. I made a bad choice. Okay. Shame is I am bad. So it's kind of when we internalize those things about us that are considered bad, and we consider that a part of who we are as our identity. So instead of saying I have fat, or I have a fat, I have fat on the outside, right? Like that's what this is. Instead of saying that, I was saying I am fat and there's something wrong with me. Right. So I allowed it to be my identity. And I would literally walk into rooms and make fun of myself on purpose before you could make fun of me.
Interesting. So you were, oh man. So I'm going to struggle through this conversation because I'm like the jerk in this that just was born with a six pack, so there's like, I'm not qualified to talk about this. And I don't know how to, I don't want to like be like falsely humble, cause that just sounds like bro, but I do not know what that's like at all. I was born with
beautiful.
Well, I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying like from like a physical,
athleticism, things like that.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting too, because typically weight and being fat, it's like girls, it's like bad news, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's a big struggle. And guys, it's like, dude, whatever. You're the man, like no one's like, you're a fat dude, It's
like, they're just like, he's a big guy.
Like everyone loves Luke Combs or what any of these people. So interestingly enough, Ned, my core's president and now co-host of The Chairman, we did an episode and he's a stud, right? I mean, he was just here, right? We just did and he's fit and athletic and played football in college. Well, he starts talking on the episode about how he was the fat kid. And I'm like, really? And he showed me pictures. I was like, dude, no way. Like that's you.
Yeah.
And he talked about what I guess would be shame, around that. I would not have used that language. I'm learning real time. And it was really interesting to even have our contrasting stories because he was sharing how like it drove him to prove people wrong and be like, screw you. I'm not going to be bullied like that. I'm not going to be treated like that. And it's been a bit of a driver, whether it's healthy or not, or, a dark or not. And I'm just like kind of fascinated by that. So anyway, I'm curious, like at what point in that experience did you say, hey, this is not who I am. Like this is not defining me permanently. This isn't hardwired in my identity. Was that as a teenager? Was that late?
Not until recently. That wasn't until just recently that I started.
You carried that.
I still try to have to separate it every day. I wake up every day having to be like, this is not who I am. I have to separate that. Like it's so ingrained in who I am that I don't know how to be anything but the fat girl, the fat pretty girl. Like that was kind of always what I was known as, right? Like the girl who has a pretty face, but she's overweight, right? And so I don't know how to I didn't know how to separate myself from that until recently. And I have to wake up every day and say, who do I actually want to be? Not who I've taught myself to be, not who I thought I had to be, not what other people have told me I had to be. So it wasn't until about 3 years ago that I started separating myself from it.
Interesting.
It was a very specific moment in my life. And after that, I started separating. And every day now I wake up and I say, what would a fit version of Bekah do? Like, what would a attractive version of me do? Because to me, attraction in what I want to look like is not 350 pounds, right? And so like, I think of myself as what does an attractive version of me do? What does a confident version of me do? Right. What does a capable version of me do, right? So I go through all of those things and that's how I've had to, but it's every day. It's an everyday battle.
like am hating having this conversation right now, but I'm really glad to have it as well. Like, it's not a fun, like, I don't like talking about this with you. Like, let's talk about philosophy or something. But if it's like a safe space, then I think we should keep drilling this down.
For sure.
And not to like me too you on this. I hate talking like this. I have actually had similar self-talk in the complete opposite. So like I have built skills and like, you know how like if a person is like, well, I'm fat, I'll just use the word. It's not fun to say it, but like, so I'm going to be funny. Like I want people to love me for my personality because they might not love me for the way that I look.
Right.
Well, interestingly enough, I have been the same way on the flip side. Like I'm like, I want people to like me because I'm smart or because I'm funny or because I am caring or kind, not because I have good hair or look a certain way or am athletically inclined.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, these like parallel paths. And I'm not claiming like I had it worse.
Right. No, like, I get it. I get it. Yeah.
You know, like, and you talked to me about pretty privilege.
Privilege. We could talk about that all day. Yeah.
Oh, right. And I was like, I don't like talking about that. And it's like, I'm like, that's not a thing. You're like, it's a thing.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
It's like you don't always get like free shit. Like, so that everyone got free shit. So anyway.
Hierarchies, man, I can talk about that so much.
And I think like for this episode, I'm gonna have Kenya put pictures of like when I was hot, you know, so that it's like, dude, you look like shit. You're 36. You're fading. No. But I literally looked like an Abercrombie model. Like that's what I looked like. And I had to find a way to not be a douchebag because I wasn't, number one. That was not my upbringing. And I built like character because I didn't want to be perceived as somebody leaning on that too much. And you're saying that you did the same thing, but in like the opposite. That's interesting.
Yeah, because you have to, when you're not attractive, like physically, as far as there's something wrong with you in society, you have to find other things, right? So I had to be hilarious, right? Like my personality had to be all these things, right? I had to do all of these things, but then I also had to create a version of myself that I hated. So it wasn't even just like, of course, my personality. I actually really like my personality, so I don't have any issue with that. But I did create this person of, I wanted to be. This is going to be so real and raw, but I wanted. I
just told everyone I look like an Abercrombie model in high school. So like,
I wanted men to want me, right? And so my thing was, I wanted to be the one that like. It made me so happy when a skinny girl would be pissed off that their man wanted me more, right? And so I became this version of myself that I hated. I know, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But it made me feel like I had some worth. And I wouldn't say it out loud, but I was like, if this man wants me and I'm 150 pounds more than this chick right here, then I must be that much better than her, because how much less than her am I? And he still chooses me, right? Wow. So I became this, and I am just now recently started talking about this, because who wants to talk about this, right?
Can I ask a super duper fun question?
Of course.
Did that equate to promiscuity?
Absolutely. Yes, very much. And that became like this version of me that I hated, like where I was like, my whole goal is to make every man that I meet attracted to me. My goal is to be the one that, they want, and to be the one, like, if I don't have male attention, then I'm not important, right? Like that became and I hated that. I didn't want to be that way. It's not like I was going around stealing my friend's husbands. I was never that bad,
You
but I was, right. I was a home wrecker, but I was that person who was like, I am only feeling worthy if I get this attention and love, right?
So it became the primary focus in your interactions with men, essentially, or boys if it was your younger years,
right?
And you then at some point, what happened? Because the part that brought me to tears was the things that happened to you, like the amount of abuse that you endured was like, holy shit, like. So I don't know if you want to get into any of that, or even in broad strokes, like you had some pretty abusive men in your life. So it wasn't like, oh, you're so loving and I'm going to treat you well because you treat me well, or you're so funny. It ended up like having the adverse effect,
for sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So growing up, I was molested as a kid, and
Ugh.
because I was overweight and then, hating my body and all those things, I remember thinking I need to not be feminine, right? Like maybe if I wasn't feminine, because I'm already not feminine anyway. So I hated the feminine part of my body in that time. So I remember being like 12 years old, like taping down my breasts, right? Like pretending like I wasn't a girl, trying to like be as like ugly as possible. I had like these, big hoodies I would wear all the time, never wore makeup, and it was always trying to just be like, I just hated everything about myself in my middle school, high school years. And then I started realizing the only way I was going to get that attention and love is to start, trying to go the opposite direction. So I started trying to get more into those things and started chasing older men and things like that. But
As a teenager.
as a teenager, I mean, I was 16 with 26, 30-year-old men. Looking back now, I realize they're like pedophiles, right? But at the time, I
You
just
should go to
remember being
jail.
like, man, I'm with this 26-year-old who loves me. And I've never talked about this publicly. I can't believe I'm about to tell you this, but
Sorry.
I remember being 16 years old with this man who was, late 20s, and he would have me go and get other girls and bring them back. And that was part of my job, right? Like my role.
Becca.
Now, I started getting molested at a very young age. And so, as the years went on, I remember thinking, this is what I am to a man. Like that was what I believed about myself, right? And I've literally never shared that. I don't even think I've shared it in therapy before. But I would come to him and he would say, okay, you got to go find one of your friends. And I would try to pick out my friend who I knew had the most trauma, or the one that I knew hated themselves enough to be able to be willing to do the things that I knew he was going to do to us. And the stuff,
my
the
God, I'm
stuff
sorry.
that he did to us at 16 is, I still carry so much guilt about the fact that I brought girls into that, because I knew what he was going to do to them and I still did. And I hated myself so much that I was like, you know what? Like I can do this, and then it's going to make him love me. If he loves me and I bring the right girls around, then, I'll earn this worth with this man, right? He ended up stealing every penny that I had. I had saved up about $10,000 to go to college. My parents still to this day don't know this. Saved up $10,000 to go to college. And a few weeks before college, he asked me to borrow some money. And I gave him all but $20 of my money. Never saw it again, of course, and had to go to school with no money. And it was that kind of thing that kind of set me up then to be like, okay, this is just who I am to a man, and I have to still earn that love. I know that was really deep. I'm really,
Wow.
I don't know why I
No,
decided to share
I
that,
know.
but
I just want to hold the space with you properly to not move on, and like that's heavy duty.
it's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's just I keep thinking, like, as you're sharing this story, I'm like, this person you're talking about, who are they? And I'm like, wait, this is you? Like we're talking about you, because the you that I know, that's not that didn't happen. That's not the case, especially when you factor in your relationship with God, what that has done in your faith to really, I mean, just to say it plainly, like, but by God, right? Like without
Yeah.
the atonement and the blood of Jesus, I don't think you come out of that even remotely functioning, let alone like a great mother, speaking, sharing, like leading. And we're all a work in progress, so it's not that you're like perfected
Right.
at this point. But that's a major contrast from what is not that long ago. You're
Yeah.
not a 60-year-old woman, right?
Right. Right.
You're younger than me.
But even now, I hear that there's a voice of shame in my mind right now saying, why are you sharing these things? Like the way that people are going to perceive you and see you is so dirty. Like that's the word that I hear. And shame
Sucks.
is dirty, right? Like that's the
That's
word
the
that I
beauty
hear.
of the gospel. Like you
Mm-hmm.
get to be a new creation, like,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't change the things you did or the things
Right.
that happened. Like you carry that shit with you, whether you did it or it was done to you, or some like gray area that and I know this just from, there's things in my past that happened to me that, and you are like a mental health expert, so maybe I'll lay on that couch and you can take notes and tell me. But I I had an experience that was, yeah, I don't want to talk about that actually. When I was young, at what was, I think, 12, 13, and I didn't look like a 12 or 13-year-old. I looked like an 18 or 19-year-old, but an 18-year-old girl took advantage of me in that way. And it fucked me up for a while, like especially around like sexuality and yeah, I mean, I've never shared this, so why we're just sharing shit that we're not gonna share. Who knows if we even publish this episode now, but that messed me up like hugely. Like to this day, I'm still like squeamish around sexuality. And it was the weirdest experience, particularly as a boy, that this is happening to, because you typically hear the narrative the other way, right? Yeah. Like a dominant, manipulative, man that is taking advantage of a girl. Right. And you're like, yeah, put that guy in jail. Or like, I see he had the strength or the will or, the resources. So I really struggled with it because the dynamics around it would be that boys like sex, boys like sexual acts, and they try all day, every day to
get it,
create that, and to get it, and to get to, and that was not what I was wanting at 13. So I wrestled with like, wait, did I make that happen? Was that me? Was that her? And there's more to that story, particularly around my childhood and not having certain resources, because she like got a lawsuit. It was kind of weird. Like she had like a bunch of money, and she like kind of took care of me. Like she like bought me shit and took me like ice cream, like kid shit. Yeah. Like it was like, you want to go to Chuck E. Cheese? I was like, that sounds great. Like, and I wasn't like 4, but I was a kid, like I was 12 or I can't remember, 12 or 13, like 7th, 8th grade. And so I think a lot of times in abuse and in trauma, you didn't like run away from it. You know what I mean? You didn't like dart out of there the moment. You didn't scream. Yep. You didn't call the police. You didn't call your parents. So you like stayed around it, and then you got burnt. Like you got too close to the fire. And then in this situation, back to you and your story, you became like a recruiter for this abuser. Yeah. Which that adds a whole nother element, because now you're carrying the shame of your victimhood, and then you're like, wait, am I now the predator? Am I the predator, not just the prey? I mean, that's some really intricate shit. Yeah.
And I just remember thinking like, this is what I have to do for him, and they have their own decision to make. Right. Right. But what's crazy is I remember one girl being strong enough to stand up to him. So I brought one girl back, and she came out and she was yelling at him, and she looked at me and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "You're too good for this." And she said, "You don't have to do what he tells you to do." And she walked out. And that was like actually the last time that I did anything with him after that. I was like, wait, she just said no. Like she stood up for herself and said no, and no one made her do it. And it was like something kind of went off in my head a little bit to realize I don't have to be the way that I am there. And that was the last time that I did that and got married young. And then some other things happened. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into that.
A lot.
Yeah. I know. But then as I got older, what happened after that?
I'm having the experience right now, by the way, that you said you were having a few minutes ago, where I'm like, what the fuck did I share all that?
Why did I just do all that?
Why did I just fucking share all that?
Yeah. You feel vulnerable, right?
Yeah, I hate it.
You feel
I'm like, I'm the host of this podcast.
Yeah, no.
I ask the tough questions.
But that's the thing. That's the shame makes us want to hide, Nathan. Like there's the Holy Spirit gave me a tagline a couple years ago where he said, there's no hiding and healing. Okay. You cannot hide and heal. I remember what this came from was because the Holy Spirit asked me to get online and to weigh myself in public on Facebook when I was 320 something pounds at the time. And I had just started my weight loss journey, and I didn't want anyone to know I was that big. Obviously, everyone knew I was big, but like I have always kind of hid my weight well and never talked about how much I weighed ever. I mean, when I tell you, like, I would have rather, done anything but to weigh myself.
Dude,
I
right now would not want to weigh myself.
The Holy Spirit was like, you're going to do this. And I remember being like, but what if they reject me? What if they think I'm just got like, what if they, yeah. And he's like, they will. But there's no hiding and healing. You're not going to tell people they're worth more than the number on the scale and then act like you're not worth more than the number on the scale. So what you're experiencing right now is shame. And that's the voice of the enemy saying, we can't expose these things.
Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also, I think there's this other element to it that I struggle with. And it's not so much about, for me, like, does a person know a thing? Like the fact of the matter isn't what bothers me. It's sort of like, I don't want anyone to ever feel bad for me. Like, that's not a thing that I feel comfortable with. And I struggle with, if I share my story, how do I put this? Like, I got enough going for, like, I got a lot going for me. Like, I've been blessed, right? Yeah. And it hasn't been easy, and I've absolutely struggled through. But like, I'm net positive. Like, I have a business, I have my health, I have influence, I have a nice car, like, relative to the way I grew up and the way my life is going, I'm doing rather well. And it's almost like a privilege type dynamic, not maybe the pretty privilege as much anymore, but just like, I'm blessed, I'm privileged, and I'm good. Like, I get enough validation, affirmation, like, people respect me, love me. The ones that don't, fuck them, like, I'm like, I don't even know you, so I'm like, I'm pretty good overall. And then if I share things like the story behind the story, not just the, like, grew up poor, fourth of 9 children, violent environment, I'm like, I hope that doesn't get perceived as me, like, trying to get sympathy. Or does this make sense? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but I think you're overthinking it.
Yeah, I'm positive. So that's where I struggle, and I think others probably do too, in like the act of being vulnerable, is there's like this element of, I'm not asking you to feel sorry for me, right? Like,
but can't
how do you
both things
manage
be
that?
True at the same time? Like, you can say, yeah, I have a lot of privilege. There's always people that have it worse than you, and always people that have better than you, right? Always. So, both can be true. They're called the dichotomy of emotions, right? Like, we can have both things at the same time.
Okay.
We can recognize that, like, yes, we both have a lot of privilege in lots of things, right? Like the fact we were born in America, the fact that we, like, have access
Even
to clean
white,
water, right? Yeah. Being white, right? Like, having like the ability to have healthcare, like all of those things, right? I mean, of course there's some things, but that doesn't take away from the hard moments in our lives and the things that have happened too.
No, I struggle with it. I do.
I'm sure. Yeah, I get that.
My strength has always been strength.
Like, my struggle with sharing is more of, how are people going to perceive me now? Because I want people to see me so much different. Right. And I want them to look at me and say, I can't imagine that person, because that's not who I am. Because I had to convince myself to be that person, because I thought that was the only way to get love, right? Like, I really thought that was the only way to get love, until I hated myself enough that I believed that's what I deserved. So I remember being in high school thinking, this is how I know this isn't right, because I was young and I knew that. I knew that a man's not supposed to treat you that way. Yeah. But it wasn't until I got older that, when I was in an abusive relationship that I just got out of almost 5 years ago, that was the relationship that I actually—
How long was that?
It was about 2 years. It wasn't too long. It was about 2 years that I was in that relationship. But I remember thinking, this is what I deserve. Like, this is actually what I deserve. And the man, was physically, emotionally, sexually, mentally, emotionally, every way possible, like, abusive to me. And I remember thinking, this is what I deserve because of the person that I am. I was so convinced that was who I was, that I believed that I deserved that.
You shared a story at the event about a man, like, forcing themselves into your home and your daughter. Is that this person?
No, that was a different person.
See, this is what's unreal, is like, man, it's amazing how deeply rooted these issues can be, it's like, I don't know if you've ever like cut down a tree or had to like remove a tree. Well, it's maybe like man work. I don't know. But like, yeah. So
too
like,
pretty for that, Nathan. What are you talking about?
Right. There's some privileges, right?
But
like if you've ever, for people listening, if you've ever done like, if you're like, oh yeah, we'll remove that tree. Like no big deal. Like it's not a huge tree. The amount of roots that tree has that are like going under the house, and like it is a big deal to take out that circumference of the tree and have it like actually come out of the ground. So it sounds like because this started so early in your development and in your life, there was like a compound effect. Almost it was rooted where through your adult life, I mean, it's pretty fresh still to where the moment like you had your day of decision.
Yeah.
Right. Which to just put it into timeline, when would you say, like what year, what season of life were you like, I'm not tolerating this anymore? But, and I think the weight is like a bit of a manifestation. Yeah. Like you literally were like, that's not me. I'm going to be letting go of this now. And it's literally been like 10 pounds at a time. You've laid like a brick down, 15 times. So I'm just curious, like, when did you like draw the line?
2022.
Oh shit. So this
not
is
very long ago.
3 years ago.
2020 is when I left my abusive relationship. And that's when I was like, I got to get out. And it took me about 2 years. I went back into the same pattern of behavior, back into the, what I know to be best, which is going back to men, which is how I got involved in the situation where you were talking about the rape, right? Because I never meant to put myself in that. I was never the person who was like, I'm going to go do hookups. Never, never been that person.
You weren't set.
But I ended up in these situations because that's what I believed that I deserved, right?
Almost like subconsciously, like do you miss it? Like does this profile of a person, are they so cunning and like narcissistic and love bomb you and shapeshift that like they're tricking you? Or do you see it and go, I'm going to roll the dice again? Like, I know that's a weird question, but like, are you aware in those, like, if we're going back prior to 2022, can you see it? Or is there like through the abuse, there's like a blinding?
Most of the time, I've never been with men who have been very good to me. So it's not like they were like.
So you knew. You're like, this guy's a dick.
Yeah, like he's terrible to me. He's trash.
Terrible.
He's trash. Like I've never even. Most of them have not. Most of them have not been like the kind that are like, I'm going to wine you and dine you and love you and then split, all of a sudden I'm this. No, it was, hi, I'm so-and-so and you're a piece of shit. And I'm like, you're right, I am. This makes sense.
I'm sorry to laugh. I just,
like it was that horrible kind of thing, it was like, and then let me give you a little, what would really mess me up though, is that they would say that, let me tell you, you're a piece of shit for 3 months. And then all of a sudden be like, oh, now you've earned a little bit of my love. Let me give you a little bit of love.
So they wear you down. That they essentially somehow in the like dynamic of it, they're seeing the weakness, the vulnerability, the like hole that's there in your heart, in your like confidence, like they see the vulnerability,
pain.
Like the pain, and then they like stick their thumb in the wound.
Yep.
And then at some point they put some salve on it and like nurse it a little bit, and then you go like, oh, you are taking care of me.
Yeah.
Man, that's fucked.
Yeah. And then when they would like, they'd give me just a little bit and I'd be like, oh, I could change this. I can make them love me. Like it was like chasing this love and attention at all times.
How old are you?
How old am I now?
Yeah.
I'm 39. I'm older than you, I think.
Yeah. I thought you were younger than me.
Yeah. I was going to let that go because I was hoping I was younger, but I'm not.
The reason I asked is because I thought you were in your early 30s, but whatever, so that's young, right? So you're 39 and you're telling me that this started at 12.
It started around 10.
Because, you mentioned that you were abused
as a kid,
as a child, at age 10 or before that?
It started around 10 or 11. Yeah.
Man, so you had, really 10, so you're talking about, holy shit.
And I was already in, Jenny Craig, all the things to lose weight by the time I was 9. I was already fully hating my body at 9.
Was it who was putting you in Jenny Craig at 9?
My parents. Because they saw all the, I was getting bullied and I think they meant well. Okay. Yeah, I think so. I was the only one that was big in my family. And so people were like, how does this make any sense? I was bullied by other people, like, oh, you're so much bigger than all the others, everyone
I
in my
didn't realize
family,
that. So,
everything.
siblings? You have
Yeah, so I have 3 brothers. Yeah.
Okay, so no sisters though
No
to
sisters.
compare.
Yeah. And my
But
brothers
your
they
mom's
couldn't,
not heavy,
no, my mom's not heavy. My dad's not heavy.
and your
Nobody. My
brothers are
grandpa, I do have a grandpa that's like obese. He was obese before he died. But apart from that, everybody else is like was a normal size.
That's a whole nother wrinkle to the story,
and
right?
then my brothers couldn't gain weight. So they would like, I'd always be like, God, you mixed us up. Like, how does that make any sense? And so it would be this thing of I don't understand why I'm the one that's big, There's a lot of layers to it, but I already hated myself at that age. So then I started young. And then, like you said, it's like the root system, right? So what happens is then I start to believe this about myself.
It's like 25 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you take from you being abused to then you continuing to be abused, but in a little bit of a like teenage way, where you're now like literally developing like as a woman biologically. And then did you have any good seasons in that time, or was that pretty straight through? No. Like there's like, I had this one guy who was great to me for 3 years, but it went sideways or got hit by a bus.
I've never been treated well.
No shit. So
never.
For 25 straight years, it was just like abuse.
When my marriage, I was married for 10 years. And it was not abuse. Like he, is a good guy. We have a good co-parenting relationship. But it was a lot of things that, I try not to talk about him just because of our relationship, but just a lot of things that wasn't great for me. But the one thing that, I had to learn with the marriage was that I got into a marriage just because I thought he was a safe person. The reason I married him was because I thought he was safe. Right. So we actually didn't have sex before we were married. And it was one of those things where it was like, I was like, wait, he's protecting me. Like he actually said, yes. I was like, he protected me. He's keeping me safe. Right. And so then it was
kind of an overcorrection of sorts.
Exactly.
Right? Like you've been living on the rumble strips, hitting the guardrail, and then this man who's like a good human and not like a shitty
and
person.
Didn't treat me like I was an object.
So you went like way to the other side.
Exactly.
But then you were like, wait, there's like a bunch here.
But there was a lot of things there in our marriage that did not work out. Right. And so as we were in the church, and so getting divorced in the church, if you know anything about that, that's a very ostracizing process. Right.
Stuff, yeah.
And so, it was a constant battle of like, okay, so now I've got this whole other thing. Like I thought I was going to be married and I was a wife and I was all that. And for 10 years I was faithful and didn't have any of the promiscuity or any of those things. But then as soon as I got, out in the world again, it was, this is what I know and I have to earn that. So to make this kind of come full circle, this is not something I ever talk about either. But, my ex-husband and I, we always had an issue with our sex drives was different. Right. And so it was me. I felt like the only thing I have to offer a man is this, right? He was not a very, he's a physical person, right? So physical touch is not his love language. Physical touch is my love language, right? So it was a constant rejection from him. I don't think he meant to, but it was a constant, like, he was like, why are you touching me all the time? That's not my love language. And I was like, I don't think you understand the pain that it causes when I want to touch you and you don't want to touch me. Oh. So then that just reiterated this, like, I'm not even good enough to make my husband want to touch me, right?
I'm sorry to laugh. Fuck.
It was like a messed up word. And then all my friends would be like, my husband can't stop touching, why won't my husband touch me? And I'm like, he doesn't want to touch me. And so we would, and he just wasn't like a very like sexual person. And and I thought that was the only thing I had to offer a man. So I'm like, I don't think you understand, and so it was a constant, like, neither one of us were wrong, I think, but we both were, going back and forth with this.
It's like a love language mismatch, but with an insane amount of trauma leading up to that mismatch.
And then he would say, it's almost weird. It's almost like you want to do this just because you feel like you have to as a wife to serve me, not because you actually want to. And I'd be like, who the hell cares? I'm here to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying, but it was a constant rejection in a different way. Right. So then it was one more, like 10 years of, okay, I must not be good enough in this way either. Right.
Because you had this one thing that like you could hang your hat on it because it was like, I mean, and you're a woman and typically that's something one-way street.
Exactly.
Like men want it, women decide when to relinquish that control or give it up or whatever.
Right.
And now you're in a marriage where that's not the sitch, and you're having to deal with all this self-talk,
rejection all the time. And it was a constant, like, I don't understand why this is a thing.
And you were heavy throughout this whole
I was
process.
heavy the whole time. Yeah. So then I hated myself because of that, right? So then there was that constant thing. Then I got out of the marriage and went into dating again, right? So then I was like, okay, I'm dating. I'm going to try to make better choices. I'm going to try to get out there. And I went on that.
I'm a woman now.
Yes, like I am grown, right? And because I married him very young, we got together.
What year did you get divorced?
We got divorced 2014.
Okay, so this is 10. So you were late 20s.
Late 20s. I was like 28 or something.
Because your daughter's 16? 15?
She's 15, yeah. So I went out and started dating again. And I was like, I'm going to do this so much better. I'm going to make sure that I understand the importance of love languages and all the things. Because that was kind of when love languages got really big, and I was like, all right, physical touch and words of affirmation. That's what I need. Those are the two things I need. I know that.
You're bilingual.
Right? Yeah. I'm like, this is what I need. Yep. And so then I went out, and one of the first dates that I went on was this awful date the whole date was great. Everything was good. I had a babysitter, and she was at home with the babysitter. And I came home and I paid the babysitter, and she left. And then within 2 minutes, I get a knock on the door, and I didn't look to see it was her. I thought it was her. I just opened the door. I thought she must have forgotten something. I just opened the door, and he had followed me home.
Oh my God.
And
wait, this is the story.
This is the story. Yeah. And he had followed me home, and he, pushed.
I didn't realize it was on a first date.
It was like the fourth or fifth date after.
Whatever.
Yeah, it was very soon after my divorce.
Yeah. Forget what I
right,
said.
I'm just saying it like it was very early on in the process of.
But that's even scarier because there's a trust factor of like, hey, what's up? Not like, who are you? Who slammed the door? So, wow.
No, it was It was the first date with him. It was the fourth or fifth date after.
Oh, it was the first date with this person. It was the
first date with this man. Yeah, yeah.
Oh shit.
First
okay, so I'm sorry. I don't mean to like pluck out the details here,
no, you're fine.
So you're saying that it was your fourth or fifth date period, like
after
in the
my
dating
divorce,
world.
Yes, in the dating.
But with this human being,
with the first time I'd ever met him.
Holy shit! Because I know how the story ends.
So we went on one date, and dinner was fine. Everything was good. I mean, it did no red flags, nothing. The whole dinner was great. And he did ask at the end of it, just like most men do you want me to come back to your place? Do you want to come back to mine? And I was like, no.
Men ask that on a first date?
Yes, absolutely.
Dude, have some freaking patience.
It's ridiculous.
Bro. It's a Tuesday.
It's ridiculous.
Like you literally could. The thing that blows my mind, and I'm a married man, right? But like, it's Tuesday.
Yeah.
On a Tuesday, right? Like in the club on a Tuesday. If she likes you, she'll see you Thursday.
Yeah.
And you'll be getting it on by Saturday.
Yeah.
If that's how you roll.
But because they bought 2 for $20 at Applebee's, they think that they deserve the goods. And it's like, bro, 2 for $20. Like, can we not?
After
like
9 p.m.
2 for $20. Yes.
You don't have price apps.
Listen, I actually had a guy ask me one time am I going to get some tonight? If not, we're going to go to a different restaurant. I swear. That was literally his response.
Your dating
because one was, he said Cheesecake Factory one direction or Chili's the other, because there's a $10 difference. I have so many stories, Nate, that I can't even tell you. Anyway,
we've got to start a podcast just about that. Well, I hear some of your stories on TikTok.
Yeah,
because you have a huge following on TikTok. How many? You got like
65,000 followers. Yeah,
65K.
Yeah, so I talk a lot about the crazy date. I don't date much anymore. It's been years, but the years ago, that's what it was. So he ended up following me home, and he pushed his way into. It was him. I didn't know. I opened the door, and he pushed himself into the apartment, and he basically was like, "I want some," and I was like, no, and why are you here? And I didn't scream, I didn't yell, I just said, you need to leave. And then I see that he makes himself known that he has a gun, and he didn't say anything. Nothing. He didn't say, I'm going to kill you. He just had the gun. And then he said, where does your baby sleep again?
Oh my God.
Because I had told him that, I had a daughter, and he said, where does your baby sleep? And that's when I was like, do whatever you need to do. Whatever you got to do to me is fine. I was like, don't hurt her. And I never did anything after that, because I didn't fight him. I didn't yell. I didn't bite him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even say no after that. I just said, whatever you have to do, you have to do. And so for a long time, I didn't even say I was raped. Like I wouldn't even say those words because I didn't feel like I was, because I hated myself so much that I was like, well, of course this would happen to me. Like it makes sense that it would, right? I mean, he must have seen something on me or understood that about me. And
or you signaled it, or you
exactly,
were flirty, which is like
because
perfectly fine on a date to be flirty.
Because I believed that about myself.
Dude,
I was like, he must
with
have
this,
seen
by the
that.
way. Like I have zero tolerance for this shit. Like I'm the type, like I'm a vigilante. Like if I would kill that motherfucker. Like legit. Like I would kill him. Like I would be like, yeah, like I would, like, you know, like Dexter.
Yeah.
Like I could do that shit.
Yeah.
I could kill people like that all day. No problem. Penn Bagley, you style. I would kill that motherfucker and just boom,
I love it.
Pop, double tap.
Pop, don't think twice.
We're doing the podcast. He's good. Pop. I'd pop him.
Yeah.
Sorry to make it funny, but fuck.
Yeah.
That dude raped you.
Yeah. But I did not say that until it was years before I could admit that, because I was just like, and even so, I didn't go to the doctor. I ended up having to have surgery because of what he did to me afterwards. But I didn't go to the doctor for quite some time because I was like, it'll be fine. I'll heal. It'll be fine, whatever. And then when I went to the doctor, I went alone. I didn't tell anybody that I went. I didn't tell anyone I was getting the surgery. I didn't tell anyone I needed help, nothing. And the doctor said, this doesn't just happen. Do you want to talk about this? Like, was this consensual? And I said, I don't want to talk about it. And he's like, well, we have resources. We have therapists. We have people, you know, and meanwhile, I'm a therapist myself, right? Going through all of these things. And I said, no, I'm fine. And he's like, this is bad. Like, you sure you don't want to talk? I said, I just want to fix the issues that are happening because of what he did. And that was it. And he said, okay, we won't have to talk about it. And that was it. And so it took me years to finally get to the place where I was like, yeah, I was raped, you know, because I never said no. And so, you know, that happened. But because I believed so little about myself, I was like, of course, like I must have done something that signaled that. And that was how ingrained that was. So of course that set me up perfectly for this abusive relationship, right? Like after, you know, being with multiple people that, you know, I'd date somebody and then I'd be like, oh, they're cheating, or oh, they're this. Well, of course it makes sense that they would cheat because I'm 300 something pounds and I'm disgusting and I'm this and I'm that. And so then I would, you know, go on to someone else. And so it set me up perfectly to go into this last relationship that almost broke me. That one was a million times worse than anything else I've ever been through in my entire life.
Worse than what you've shared already?
A million times worse. That 2 years of my life was the worst 2 years of, like, times a million.
I still can't believe we're talking about you.
Those 2 years. And I think the biggest part.
And that was the one from 21 to 23?
Yeah. No, it was 2019 to 2018 to 2020. 20 is when I left him. But he would use the Bible in such a way that twisted the word of God to the point where it got in my head so badly. There's still scriptures I can't read to this day without throwing up, without getting sick, without feeling disgusting.
Oh my God, that's so bad.
And I think that was what would make it so bad about it. And he would just like call me all these names, but all through the lens of scripture, which I don't hear people talk about much.
Right. You know, it's interesting you say that because there's a few people that come to mind. I'm not going to, like, I just, you know, you hear stories about people and then they kind of are proclaimed Christian. It's like, yeah, no wonder people, like, I'm a Christian. I'm like a real fucking Christian. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like the real ones. And I'm like, yeah, like, no wonder, like, these assholes, you know? So, oh man. So you're telling me that he used a biblical Christian lens to be an abuser? Because normally when you hear that, you think of like cult leader or like, you know, somebody that's influencing like a group of people to
drink the Kool-Aid.
Right. Yeah. Or like, you know, allocate their finances to the fraudulent cause. Right. You don't think so? It's always like not macro, like the economy, but like, you know, groups of people, not like a single person. So was he like a pastor or like he
has a huge hundreds of thousands of followings on YouTube. And it was all end time stuff. So he would talk about like the rapture and the end times and things like that. So he made a lot of money doing YouTube about the Bible.
Is he still out there doing the thing?
He sure is. He's very well known in that world. And
swipe up, bitches. We gotta put that link in bio, dude.
Link in bio, bitches.
Yeah, but don't
And what's
follow
crazy
him.
is he is very, I'm still very scared of him. I'm not gonna lie. Like it's very terrifying, like I get really scared. But he would use the Bible, he would always say like his, the scriptures he would say is like a wise woman builds up the house and the foolish woman tears it down with her own hands. So, I would just be like doing something. I'd just be walking through the living room and he'd be like, you stupid bitch, you're tearing down our house, and I'd just be like, what are you talking about? Like what I'm walking through the living room, And he would, the crazy thing though, is that he would do these things in public. So I remember one time we were at a restaurant and I went to the bathroom and came back and he was always convinced I would cheat, even though I knew I would never cheat on him. First of all, he would have killed me. Second of all, I just am not a cheater. I've never cheated on a relationship in my life. And so I was in the bathroom and I came back and for whatever reason, he decided he didn't like me. And that time I was in the bathroom and I sat down and he looked over at these two guys that were next to us and he goes, do you want this fat bitch? And they were like, what? God. And he goes, do you want her? Because I don't want her. She's disgusting. And he just goes on and on about how disgusting I am and all these things. No, he was totally sober. And then he left me there and I had to walk home. And there was other times where, I didn't realize he had taken naked pictures of me when I was getting out of the shower. And he took them and he blew them up and he posted them all over my work. He just like dropped them off in the parking lots of my work. He emailed pictures of me naked to my bosses. He emailed my grandma pictures. He would just like he posted stuff on Craigslist about me, naked pictures of me that I didn't know he took. Like,
Bekah, this
just
is
awful.
Netflix
and I hate
series.
My body so much, right? At 300 something, but I hated my body so much. And here I am like in this shame place. And he would just take it and he would just, just show the most vulnerable spots that I didn't know he was doing.
You're lucky to be alive.
Oh, for sure.
Characters.
For sure. Then I remember one day he threw hot coffee in my face and then he started saying scripture over and over again in my ear as my face was like burning. It was like burning the whole side of my neck. And he's just saying scripture over and over and over again.
And why did you stay for 2 years?
I was terrified of him.
So the mentality here is if I leave, if I reject him, if I say not tolerating it, screw you, I'm calling the police, you're going to end up dead.
Yeah.
It's that.
Honestly, it wasn't even the dead part as much as the fact that I felt alone and I felt like there was no way out. So I remember the first 3 months were.
I hear this, but I'm not in your line of work, and I'm sure this is probably like a day in the life for you. So I'm sitting here like I don't mean to be so like dumbfounded, like jaw dropping, but I'm just like, what? There's a roller coaster ride right now. Mainly just down.
Yeah, it's just down. No ups, right?
We're going up. So we're going to get you on the up and I'm up and I'm up. Yeah. But it's like the Forrest Frank song. I was down, but now I'm still down.
Still down.
Like we got to get back up. but so I'm not like qualified on the topic. And it's been interesting, even like I said, with the podcast and the 21st episode. I mean, I am in these conversations around suicide, around alcoholism, addiction, abuse. And I'm like, whoa, God, like you're doing something with the My Core podcast. Cause like, whoa.
Serious,
like, and I don't know what or why, but I'm like here for it. So I hope I'm not like conducting myself inappropriately because I don't know how to respond. I'm sure in your work you have like a poker face when people tell you things, but I'm like, what in the actual fuck? So I would be the worst therapist.
No, you're great.
They would be like, yeah, and then this happened. I'd be like, that's insane. Like, so sorry.
No,
I'm sorry. However, on a real raw note, I just am fascinated because I'm afraid that this is not as rare as it ought to be.
Oh, it's not.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that people think that you can just like, people would tell me, I don't understand why you stayed. I mean, people say that now. I don't understand why you stayed. You're so strong. You're so this, you're so that. Right. And I am like, absolutely. However, the thing is, I remember the moment that it switched. The first couple months were great. Everything was good and whatever. And then there was a moment where it switched. And I remember he didn't want me to go to lunch with one of my friends. And as I was walking out the door, he said, if you leave, I will slit your throat, bitch. And he said it as serious as it, but sitting there typing, just typing away. I will slit your throat from one end to the other.
Oh my God.
And I just like looked at him and I said, excuse me? And he's like, you heard me. And then he went back to what he was doing. And I said, well, my friend drove an hour to come have lunch with me. I don't understand. Like, what are you talking about? Whatever. And he was like, well, you're a whore, right? Because here's the thing. I had told him about my past. I opened up and I was vulnerable. I told him about my past and I said, hey, I want you to know this is the kind of person I was in the past. This is what I've done. And he's like, you're a whore, right? So you're probably sleeping with her.
With
And I was like,
her?
with
Is
her.
this a
It was a
girlfriend?
woman. Yeah. And I said, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, you're probably sleeping with her, right? So he's like, so if you go, I will slit your throat. I will bury you and your parents will never find you.
Dear
And
God.
and I just remember being like, I've never been spoken to like that before. I mean, I've had some bad shit happen to me, but I've never been spoken to that like that before, So I was like, this is wild. And I just remember being like, I don't know what to do.
The details.
And it went on and got crazier from there. But after that, I was like, I got to get out. Right. And so I was like, I have to get out. And so
that was a moment where you were like,
I was like, this isn't right. I gotta leave.
I'm
like,
that's
not
okay,
it was
like,
right?
I'm gonna kill you in this way, and this is how I'm gonna get away with it. And you're like, whoa.
Exactly. So then but I didn't know what to do. I mean, I kind of was just in this place where I was like, I'm not really sure how to leave. And I have to tell him to leave. And I don't know because he had moved himself into my house. It was a whole thing.
So he's living with you.
So he's living with me. And my daughter was at her dad's for the summer. So he kind of made himself, he came home one day and was like, oh yeah, I don't have a lease anymore. I moved all my stuff in just so you know I'm here now. And I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So it kind of was one of those things where I was like, now I got to get him out and I don't know what to do. Right.
Like
so one of my friends started noticing and paying attention. It was a man and he got really worried about me. Like we were strictly platonic and he called me and he said, hey, are you okay? And this is the day after this happened. He started noticing things about me. Called me, he said, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm a little scared. And he was like, I'll help you. And so he ended up calling me the next day and he was like, how can I help you get out? Well, the guy I was with ended up seeing that he had called. And he called and he found out where this guy's daughter went to school and threatened his kindergartner. He was like, I will show up to this kindergarten. I will slit her throat. I will do all these things. And he threatened his mom, his grandma, his kindergartner. And my friend ended up having to block me. He's like, I have to save my kids. I have to block you. I'm sorry. And he ended up having to, I tried to buy a couch off somebody on Craigslist and that guy ended up having to get a restraining order against him because that's how crazy he was from this random guy.
How did you get out? Was it all talk? I mean, he obviously didn't kill you.
He obviously didn't kill me. Yeah, but it was
like,
it was
show up here.
He did do things like
you're tracking.
I mean, it's not out of the it's not out of the realm of possibility.
I'm not like a manly man. I'm gonna hit him with my Elvis mic.
I got you.
Yeah.
No, it is one of those things that I get scared about because I post where I go a lot, right? I mean, I have a pretty big following. I post where I go. I post those things, and he still the last time he tried to contact me was 3 weeks ago. So it's been 5 years, and he's I'm a little scared.
Did you tell me in Suite 121, 25 North? Talking about 25 North Market Street, Jacksonville, Florida 32202.
I love it. Yeah, 3
co-working
weeks
space. I'm sorry.
But so I ended up I got out because basically I thought this was going to be my life, until I just told myself once my daughter turned 18, I could kill myself. That was my plan. And so I was
so
planning
we're still not going up. Let's go down.
You said, how did we get out? Right. So I'm telling you. So at one point, then, he comes to my daughter and he says, hey, can I marry your mom? And he said, and my daughter says, absolutely not. And he was like,
you gave the Reader's Digest in your talk, but this is like,
this is a little bit more. Yeah. So then
part 2, 3,
so she says,
4.
absolutely not. And he says, why? And she says, I hear my mom cry every night in her room. And I just don't think that's love. And then she said, and also when we're out, you tell other women how much prettier they are than my mom. And I just think that whoever marries my mom should think she's the most beautiful girl in the world. She was 9. And I just looked at her and realized, wow, I'm doing something. So then 2 days later, his daughter got in trouble. His daughter was 15 and she was caught with a boy doing some things. And he ended up trying to embarrass her by dragging her out to the street naked when she was found with a boy, right? So he drug her out to the street naked and tried to shame her by showing her off. And that's when I was like, what is wrong with you? I was like, this is not okay. And he was like, if she's going to act like a whore, this is what the Bible says about whores. We need to stone her. I mean, he was like, yeah, that's what he said. We need to stone her. And the next time we will. And I was like, this guy is he's crazy. So that's when I called my ex-husband and said, I need you to take my daughter for a couple months. I have to figure out a way to get out because he had guns in my name and he would have them locked up. So I didn't know how to get access to them.
And just because you said something earlier that, you know, it was like a bomb within a bomb. At this stage, are you still essentially suicidal? Like saying I'm going to end, like I'm done with me now.
Yeah.
Like,
because obviously I fuck everything up. Obviously that's just who I am. And I thought I fucked my daughter up. I thought I fucked everything up, and she would be better without me. But I didn't want to be selfish. So at that moment,
you were like, I gotta be done with this life thing.
Mm-hmm. But I wanted to wait until she was 18 so that she at least had a mom.
Wow. So you're navigating at that time it's like you're preserving your daughter, you're preserving yourself as far as like protecting yourself from him. It's clear that like this is, because you're not going to, in your mind, you weren't saying like, all right, I'll ride this out. She turns 18. I kill myself. And then all is well, you know, she'll be fine. She's an adult. You are still trying to get out, but having that dark thought of shame and guilt and just straight like,
at that point, the only reason I even told myself I could get out was because I really thought he was going to kill me. And I thought that way I wouldn't have to kill myself. So no one would hate me for killing myself.
Whoa. So I know. You're telling me, okay, this is so intricate. So you're saying that in your mind at the time, right? And we've all been in places where you look back and go like, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? Like that, like in any variation. But just to get this right, the fear of dying by removing yourself, him finding you, killing you, and saying like, I own you, you know, like that no longer was a fear because in your mind you were like willing to die anyway.
Yeah.
So you rolled the dice knowing maybe he'll kill me.
Maybe he'll kill me. Maybe he won't.
Do it myself.
Yeah.
And then in a way, you're almost, I'm not saying this like for real, but like there's almost a psychology of like, it's like the whole quitting versus getting fired, you know? It's like, well, I'll be the victim.
Let it happen.
Yeah, just let it happen. Like I'll just get fired instead of quit.
Because I still was so paralyzed by people pleasing. I was afraid that people would hate me at my funeral if I killed myself. That was actually the reason I didn't kill myself. I'm not even kidding. My people pleasing was so deep that I was like, if I kill myself, my family's going to hate me.
That'll be such an inconvenience.
I know. I'm like, I'm going to be such a burden.
Whacked my nose.
I'm going to be such a burden. And then I'm going to be the piece of shit that killed herself before her kid turned 18. And I can't be known as that.
I mean, again, I keep having this image in my head of you like with a saw and an axe and a shovel. And I know that sounds like, you know, maybe I've been watching too much You, but do you like that show?
I've never seen it.
Oh, you never watched You? It's like right up your alley.
I know. I'll have to check it out.
I think you might like it too much.
Awesome. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So yeah, just as trigger warning, beware. But like sawing through the root system, you know, and like maybe you break off a root or a portion, but there's just like so much more that it's like in Jumanji when the freaking vines come through the house. So at what point, and obviously this is going to be a lifelong journey, right? 3 years out, you're not like, good, you know, great. Like I've actually chopped up the wood and now it's, you know, for the fireplace every year around the stockings, around the Christmas tree. And so like, I get that, you know, that's still there. It's a process, right? For all of us. But at that moment, you're so down and so like, just, I guess, destitute, you know, and I'm not desperate, but just like, fuck it, you know, like you're done. And you know the Lord though, like you had a relationship with God, but so much darkness and so much shame and so much sin, mainly others and some of your own somewhere in there, I guess, right? It's a weird way to measure that. And you're just at the lowest point. Are we going lower than this at this point? Like,
there's a lot that I've left out, but it's definitely like, those are the big hitters,
the big
right?
low
The big low moments.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want, like, I could get a fucking
I just feel like all we keep
scuba
doing is
mask
going lower,
and a
so I
tank.
won't even.
Yeah,
There's other things.
What is that called when they go too far in the depth and then they come up? They get like the bends or whatever.
Like, yeah, we were like all discombobulated.
Yeah, like,
you can't like focus. Yeah, no, but I do want to like bring it up, like, you know, back up to the.
And that's
hope,
our
right?
episode. So have a great week.
I don't want to leave them in the basement, so to speak, right? There is so much hope. And so, you know, finally I did get up the gumption to leave. I sent my daughter to stay here in Florida with her dad. I was in Indiana, and that was really hard because, you know, sending her here, I was like, am I ever going to get her back? And what are they going to think? And what are they going to say? But
so you did like, you made actual arrangements to remove your daughter from the situation. And in your mind, you're like, she's going to be safe with her father and I'm going to die.
Yeah. Because I was afraid that he would either kill her, hurt her, or hurt me in front of her, and that would scar her. So I was like, I have to send her here. So she had just come back from the summer, spent a few months with me. They're living in Indiana, and I was like, I have to send her back. So I felt terrible.
And for her, that's a new school.
That's a new school. That's everything, right? I mean, that's this across the country from your mom, right? And she's always lived with me. She didn't know any different. But what's crazy is she's so emotionally mature. I sat down with her and I said, I have to get out. And she said, thank God. And I said, she was like 9. And I said, I'm going to have you go to your dad's for a little while. And I said, I'm going to come as soon as I can. And she said, do whatever you got to do, Mom. And that was that. And so I sent her to stay with her dad. And it took me a few months of me following behind him to get the codes for me to get my guns. And I knew as soon as I told him I was leaving that he would go straight for the guns, and he did. And I had already gotten them because I followed behind him and was able to catch the codes.
Hold up. You're I'm sorry. So you're telling me that you are like plotting and scheming, following him, like kind of pretending like you're doing the laundry, and you're like
watching
2, 3, 4. All right, I guess the next time he touches his guns, like,
yeah,
that takes a while. How long did that take?
Months, like 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
So, because of course he had lied to me about why he couldn't get guns. Turns out he had multiple domestic violence charges, you know, broken bones from his exes, things like that. Like tried to set one of them on fire, all kinds of
So whose guns are these?
Mine. So he had me take them out in my name. He said we needed protection.
So you were under his spell that much that he manipulated you to even get the possible murder weapon
for myself. Yeah. I remember being at the gun place being like, this is the gun he's going to kill me with. Oh. I remember thinking that, but I was like, what am I going to do? He's going to kill me with his own hands. I'd rather him kill me with a gun. Right. And so I bought the
Curious
guns.
Bekah George.
I know.
You are far too curious, Bekah George.
I know. So I ended up following behind him. And then one day I was like, I have to get out. And actually his daughter had told me after he did that whole thing with her, she actually called me one day and she said, Bekah, you're the best thing that's ever happened to my dad. You're amazing, but you don't deserve this. And she said, I used to have to watch my dad beat my mom to a bloody pulp. And she's like, I will never recover from those things. And she said, please don't make Maya do that. Maya's my daughter. Please don't make Maya do that.
This is his daughter.
This is his daughter. Yeah. And she said, I hate to ask you to leave because you're the only good thing about coming over there. She's like, but you have to get out. And I was like, you're right. And so I just said, there's not going to be any perfect time. So I got my daughter's favorite toys, just a few of her toys, because I couldn't take all of her stuff. I was paying all the bills. You know, he was making money from YouTube, but it was hit or miss. And so I paid 100% of the bills. We had multiple houses because he forced me to.
I can't believe so, a public
it was crazy. Yeah.
In all this.
And so we basically, he was at one of the houses doing some stuff and I was at the other, and I knew I had about an hour and a half to get as much stuff as I could fit into the vehicle. And it was late at night. And so I fit as much stuff as I could, a couple suitcases and a couple of her favorite things. And he ended up pulling in as I was pulling out. And then it was a high speed chase. And I finally, got rid of him and drove straight through the night to Florida and had, I think, $8 in my bank account because he had access to my money, took all my money, had nothing, had no job, had no way of survive, had no idea what I was going to do.
This is how you got to Florida?
This is how I got to Florida.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
So that is the way you moved from
Indiana to Florida.
Indiana to Florida.
I left everything I owned behind. I had multiple houses I had furnished. I left every single thing behind.
Oh my gosh.
And just started over.
Is your name Bekah George?
Yes.
Or are you under the witness
Rebecca.
protection?
But yes, no, it
Okay,
is.
cool.
Yeah.
Like, so what's your real name? Because obviously
So
you've joined the witness protection program.
obviously, no, I
Oh
came
my
to Florida, and of
gosh.
course, it took me a couple months to start like getting my daughter regularly, which but at least I was able to see her. But I was afraid he'd come kill me, so I said, let's just keep it a couple months. I had no
And were you
money, I had
no
no furniture.
contact, or did you still like?
I went no contact
Okay,
completely. I've never
okay,
responded
okay.
a single time in the last it's been almost
Okay,
5
so when
years,
you
and
were
I've never
done,
responded.
you
I had to go and get a new number because he would call hundreds of times a day. I ended up finding he had a tracker on my car, so I had to get somebody to find that in my car. I had to get a whole new phone because he had an app on my phone that spied on me, so I had to get a whole new phone. Lots of those things. But once I got a new phone, I got that off my car. And then I was able to come to Florida. And even so, I have 3 brothers, called my older brother and I said, hey, can I come stay with you for a little while? And he said, no. He said, I'm too scared of what this guy could do.
the really skinny one.
Well, now he's bigger. Now he's 6'1", and he's like a much bigger guy.
Man up. Give him some macros.
He said I have a family to protect, and apparently that wasn't me,
That's
and I get it, but at the same time, it was very hard for me because I was like, I have 3 brothers. You would think I would be protected, but he was like, look, I have a daughter, and if he follows you, and he said, so what I can do is I can give you one night. You can stay here on your way to Florida, and then I'll give you $500.
It's nice
and
it was a rest stop.
That was it. Yeah. So I stayed with him one night. He handed me $500, and he was like, this is all I can do for you. And I was like, all right. And so he gave me that. And, but the cool thing is God had provided for me beforehand, and I didn't know it. So this is 2020, right in the middle of COVID, right? This was like March 2020, and the Holy Spirit, no, this is a few months before March 2020. Okay. The Holy Spirit was waking me up in the middle of the night, 2019, and at the end of the year. And he was like, start a business. And I was like, I don't want to start a business. Why would I start a business? I don't want to give him I don't want to give him more access to my money. I already worked a full-time W-2 job making really good money. Why would I do this? And the Holy Spirit kept saying, start a business, start a side gig as a therapist on the side. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. Well, the only reason I was able to take care of myself was because I'd already started it. So I started it at the end of 2019, seeing clients virtually before it was cool to see virtual clients because COVID wasn't a thing yet. COVID hit, I already had at least half clients.
So you could do
on
it
the
from
side,
Florida.
so I could do it from Florida
with your license
as my license in Indiana, and so that was the only reason I was able to survive coming to Florida because I
wasn't.
wasn't. Yeah, I still do it.
I don't know why
and
my
so the
voice
Holy
went
Spirit.
up so what the hell is that?
Holy Spirit, and that's what's so cool about God is He prepares us to know what we need before we even need it. I didn't know that I would need that,
even at the darkest
and He just kept waking me up, and He's like, "Start it," and I'm like, "All right, Lord, I'll start it." And so that's how I was able to come and start my life over and figure it all out from Florida.
So 2020, and then you start rehabilitating at that point.
And I still was so angry with God. I was so angry because I'm like, why did you even put me here?
Because I feel like you mentioned a date of 2022.
That was when major things started changing. Yeah. So between 2020 and 2022, I kind of was just an autopilot.
So you were kind of out of the woods, but in like you had, it's like when they extract like a survivor from the
wild,
or or the jaws of life, and they pull them out, and you're just like in complete shock,
complete freeze,
like 2 years of just like mentally surviving. And then in that rehab, in that season of healing, you could then sort of go, oh, I think I could do something about this now.
Yeah.
So really these past 5 years, about exactly, the first 2 were like you're wearing the space blanket or whatever they put around, after like the marathon when you're like in shock. And then the past 3 years, you've been like, your feet have been under you, and that's where the weight loss started.
Yes.
And starting to build your speaking. Like, when did you start going out and sharing your story?
That started about 2 years ago. That's when, 2 years ago, I got somebody contacted me and said, hey, can you come speak to a group of women who are starting to try to get out of domestic violence? And I was like, I don't talk about domestic violence.
Hold up real quick. So you're telling me and maybe I'm being naive here, but there's talks of people that are still in it.
Yeah.
And and they're like, how do
I get out?
are they like kind of having to lie where they even are? Obviously,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, most of them are I think people who have signed up through like they're part of a shelter or
Oh,
something like
okay.
that, so they're there actively or they're involved in like the community,
Okay.
those pieces of things. So there was basically an event of you either just got out of one or you've been in one in the past or you're in one right now. And so I came and I just spoke, and all I did was say very, very brief. I've really still never talked about that relationship
Right.
much, but I just shared very briefly about what it was like to get out. And I remember being on stage though and being like, this is what I'm called to do. Like it was that moment of
Right.
like, wow. But to the actual healing moment, I have to talk about that real quick because of what actually like, led us there. So the first 2 years, like I really was just in this panic mode. I hated God. I didn't hate him. I always
You
loved
were
him, but I was very
angry,
angry with
yeah.
him. And I was just like, God, what did you even create me for? Like, I'm just, I'm trash. I'm all of these things. And but I always grew up knowing God, and I knew the Holy Spirit, and I still would hear from him, and I'd be like, God, why do you still love me? Why are you still talking to me? But I didn't want to have hope because hope is scary. And as long as I didn't have hope, then I wouldn't be disappointed because I thought I was going to mess it up again. I was like, I'm going to end up in another abusive relationship that's going to kill me. That's what I'm going to do, or I'm going to kill myself. And so then I decided to go to church because one day my daughter was like, Mom, you should just go to church. Like I would take her to church and I would drop her off and I would sit in the parking lot and I would not go in. And I did the same thing during my divorce and all this other things because I didn't find healing in God. And so I would sit there and then I'd pick her back up and she'd be like, Mom, just go in. Well, this was at the time my ex-husband was the pastor of the church and one of the pastors, he was on staff.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't want to go in there and have him see my brokenness when he's been remarried and has a new life and has all these things. And I'm like, I don't want to do that, and I just felt this tug to go in. So I was like, fine, whatever, I'll go in. And
Is he in Florida now?
He's in Florida. Yeah.
Okay.
So he lives in Orlando. So he was on staff and I was like his wife and they made it work and they have a family and I don't. And I'm, I must be the problem. And so I'm all of these things. Right. And so I went in there and as soon as I entered in the room, I just felt the Holy Spirit talk to me and he's like, I missed you. And I remember being like, God, why would you miss me? Like it reminded me of the prodigal son, right? Of that story. And I was like, you really miss me? And he's like, I miss you. And I was like, okay. And he said, it's time for you to grieve. It's time for you to grieve the loss of everything the enemy has stolen from you. And I was like, what are you talking about? I did all these things to myself. This was me. And he was like, the enemy has been out to get you since you were born because you have such a huge calling on your life. And because of that, he's tried to steal that from you. And so he said, I want you to grieve all the way back to childhood. Grieve the loss of everything, your innocence. And then all the way up to your divorce, grieve your marriage, grieve the life you thought you had, grieve what you thought your life was going to look like. And then grieve that rape and grieve all these things. And I said, God, if I open that up, I don't know that I'll be okay. Right. And he said, I'm here. And I said, okay. So for 21 days, all I did was cry. 21 days, all I did was wail and cry and sob and fast and pray. And after the 21 days, I came back to the same spot and I laid down before the Lord and I said, God, what now? And he said, now it's time for you to dust yourself off, get yourself out of the pig pen and act like you're mine. And that was when I just saw this vision of him just being like, I've been here this entire time. And he said, no one can pluck you from my hand. Like you're mine. And that's when I was like, I'm yours. Like, it doesn't matter if I smell like dirt, if I look like dirt, if I am dirt, like, it doesn't matter. I'm his. And that's when I started kind of like reconnecting back to, okay, I'm yours. And so I was like, where do I go from here, God? Because just because I've started the healing process, I still feel like I've been stabbed 1,000 times. Right. So what do I do? And so then over the course of the next few weeks, the Holy Spirit was speaking to me and I was in the shower and I hated myself to the point where I covered all my mirrors, right? So I didn't want to look in the mirror because I was disgusting. I hated myself. And so I had my mirror covered and I heard the Holy Spirit, the voice, and he whispered in my ear and he said, get out of the shower and look at yourself naked. And when I tell you I would rather run in traffic than look at myself naked, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And he was like, look at yourself naked. And I was like, I will not. And I went back and forth. I fight with God. And I was like, absolutely not. Finally, I was like, all right. So I take off the thing and I look in the mirror and I just stand there for what felt like hours. It was probably like 2 minutes, but felt like hours. And I just stood there and I'm like, all right, Lord, I see it. I'm disgusting. I get it. What do you want from me? As I'm yelling that out to God, I was like, what do you want from me? I'm disgusting. Like, why am I here? And he said, do you want to be made well? Do you really want to be made well? And it reminded me of that story, right? Of the invalid in the Bible where, he'd been sick for 30 years. And I never understood it because I'm like, why would you ask someone who's been sick for 30 years, do they want to be made well? Of course they do. But we sometimes we like get used to our suffering to the point where that becomes our identity.
It's who you are.
Yeah. Point. So he said, do you really want to be made well, or do you want to keep living like this? Because you can keep living like this and I'll still let you go to heaven.
Right.
But is this what I created you for? Wow. And he said, do you want to be made well? Because that means you can no longer identify in your suffering. And I said, yes, Lord, I want to be made well. And it was like scales fell from my eyes. And I looked at myself and I was like, you're beautiful. For the first time in my life, that's when I was like, oh my gosh. Like, and I don't mean like some surface level, whatever. It was like a beauty that God created. And that's when I was like, what the hell am I doing? And then it was that day where I decided, I got out. A friend of mine contacted me like that next day and was like, hey, I've got this weight loss thing, whatever. And so we started talking about like health and all that. And that day I got out my scale and I weighed myself and I was like, I will never be this heavy again. And I started dropping weight and that was that. And so now here I am 150 something pounds later.
Wow. Good for you. But I love how you're not sharing some story of self-reliance or I picked myself up from my bootstraps. Mm-hmm. I mean, absolutely. There's the you factor. There's the free will. There's the decisions that you make in it. It's not that simple, even as I will create content that's sometimes teetering on like, you got this, I know too much to know that it's a spiritual battle first and foremost. I've always loved this saying in the Christian world, right? Where we're not physical beings having a spiritual experience, but we're spiritual beings having a physical experience. So the like bondage that you were under for literally, I mean, that's 35 years of your life, essentially. 36, this was 3 years ago?
Yeah.
That your weight loss journey and that day of decision, kind of day of disgust was how long ago was it?
2022.
Yeah, so 3 years ago. Yeah, so if you're talking 35, 36 years, for your full life, it took that much. And dear God, you just shared a lot. And I know that's not everything. And that's not all the gory details. Those are the low lights, I guess, not the highlights.
Right.
How cool is that, right? And I think for people that are in it and going through it, it's like, this is not, we're not talking about religion, like religion screws things up. That's what the guy, the abuser, he was somehow wrapped up in a religion.
Yep. This
is a relationship with our creator that is so much more than a doctrine or a theology. And I think something that's so powerful about it, I think sometimes when we look at like God's will and free will, we ask ourselves, like, is it 100% him and 0% me? Is it 100% me? I have to take extreme ownership. And he's like, whatever, it's cool. Is it 50-50? I'm of the belief, kind of like a marriage, that it's 100%, 100%. Like it's 100% him and it's 100% you, right? Like you have to do the work in conjunction with God's will for your life. And that's a really challenging grapple and tension to hold. But I'm like super proud of you, Bekah. I mean, dear God, like even just from the standpoint of like sharing it and making it part of your life to be on display, public speaking into women's lives, being on this podcast and in other settings, to share who you are and to be that open while you're still in it in a lot of ways, right? Because you've taken the big pieces out, but correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you're still sawing through and hacking through and shoveling through and going like, man, I got to get this thing fucking uprooted.
I still have to every single day. Yeah. Be like, that's not who I am. This is who I am.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is so powerful. I talk a lot about leading with who, and just that entire like way of thinking and philosophy. And there's just so much power in the words I am. When you were sharing earlier, I talk about this sometimes, like in our language, to not be lazy in language. And we're limited kind of even to a detrimental point in the English language. Like in Spanish, their verb to be has two versions of it. There's like the temporary, right, and the permanent. So you don't say I am hungry. You essentially are saying I'm in a state of hunger,
yeah.
like you said earlier, right? So yet in English we use the same verb, and then we don't realize the power of that when we say I am fat, or I am ugly, or I am a victim, or I am screwed, or I am poor, or I am weak. And it's like, if you say so.
If you say so, exactly. There's a death and life are in the power of the tongue. And that's where I've started really shifting. And that's one of the reasons I have to give myself a voice. Like I have to have the voice because, I have to tell people, because shame makes us want to hide. Shame grows in the dark.
Yeah.
And so the more you keep it in the dark, the more it's going to grow and it's going to hide. So of course, every single time I get up and talk about something like this, there's that voice in my head that's like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. And I'm like, no, I'm going to, because it takes the power away and it gives the power to God, right? Because he is the only one, but God, I would be dead, right? Like not only would I be dead, like I'd be, a hot mess in so many ways,
dead,
right? Like dead, right?
Like your shit's like
legit dead, right? And so, I'm just like, I owe him so much. And so I have to share that. And then I see these people that are still stuck in those things. And I'm like, you don't have to be stuck. You could be anything you want. If you told me, that I could be like, I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right?
Oh, really?
And I have always been told, you're not athletic. You're the one that's chosen last. You're all of these things. And I'm actually really good at BJJ. And I had no idea. And it's like shifting my mindset to, I could be whoever I want to be, right? I don't have to allow myself to be these things, but there's still those moments where it shows up.
Right.
And
it rears its head, right? Yeah, it always does.
But I want to be able to share with people, to be like, you don't have to stay stuck in whatever narrative you've been told since you were little about who you think you are.
It's good. Yeah, I just keep thinking back to the imagery of the planting, because in a way you're uprooting this old creation and you have this new creation that is rooting, and it's probably like a sapling at this point, where it's a tree, but it's like the trees here in Florida in these master plan communities that they just sort of planted in there to check the box and say like, there's a tree. And it's like, why are there straps on the tree? Like it's on the top of my roof,
right?
Like it's like, oh, because it hasn't rooted yet. So every single day, and I would imagine that.
Oh, that's so good. It hasn't rooted yet. That's so good. Right. Can we just take a moment and say how fucking good that is? That's so good.
Right?
Jeez.
Little fun wordplay.
That's so true though, because it hasn't rooted yet. So oh my God, straps. I could preach on that. That's so good.
So it's like, no, it gets me excited. I live for this shit. Those moments, like you have to be really conscientious of the environment that you're in, the people you're surrounding yourself with, the people that are coming to try to be the wind and the rain and the sun, and the double-edged sword is that the same thing that can make you can break you. So like you need rain, but not too much of it. You need sun, but not too much of it. You'll have drought. You need wind and air and oxygen, but if it's whipping and it topples you over during a hurricane, there's no getting that tree back up. You got to toss it and rebuild all over again. So I think there's just like the awareness of that and sort of looking at nature as a bit of a metaphor. You look at these like Spanish moss, whatever they are, trees, like the ones like in Georgia and up here. I mean, those things are amazing.
Yeah,
right?
They're
like,
beautiful.
They're like taking over, and the road is like cutting through. And I mean, the trunk of it is the size of this room, and it's just like, that's how I think we have to build our lives and build it on fertile ground and build it in the right soil and with the right people around us and with the right, philosophies. And I'm just so proud of you for like taking the cards that were dealt and not just chalking it up to, well, this is who I am. I'm the fat girl that life sucks for, and I just have to survive it. For you to be like, no, fuck that. Actually, I'm going to take ownership, but still it's not self-reliance. And that's the thing I think is really special about your story, Bekah, is that you are stepping into it 100% while giving God 100% of the glory and credit. And I'll tell you that 100 is I think where the power is at.
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't know if I was just preaching there, I kind of blacked out for a second, but hopefully
no, that
sense.
Rooted thing is so beautiful though. It really is, because it is. It's like, and I love that you said you have to be careful who you're around, because there are those people that come back and it's like they'll come back in, and all these people from my past will come back and they try to remind me of who I used to be, right? And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Like I'm going to shut that down. And you have to surround yourself with people who see that little. There's the story of, Peter when he walks on water with Jesus, and it's because he actually got, he said, if it's you, call me out of the boat, right? He said, Jesus, if it's you, call me out of the boat. And so sometimes we have to have like somebody who sees that in us to call it out in us, right? And so it's like, who are you surrounding yourself with? And so in this last few years, I started like getting therapy, right? I started a few businesses. I started, I lost weight. I started surrounding myself with people who, love the Lord, but also with people who see good things in me, because I had what happens is we have these self-fulfilling prophecies, right? And I would surround myself with people, even friends who really didn't like me. I remember one time I went to hang out with a girlfriend years ago when I was, like bigger and hating myself. And we were at a like a bar place, and this guy started talking to me and not her. And she looked at him and she said, "Why are you talking to me? I'm so much prettier." Or why are you talking to her? I'm so much prettier. I don't understand. Like, what? Yeah, she said that. And I just kind of laughed and was like, oh, yeah, that's just how she is, And the guy actually looked at me and said, why do you want a friend like that? Right. And he said, I actually like, he goes, first of all, I can tell her personality does like, wonders compared to yours. But second of all, like, I thought she was pretty and I wanted to talk to her. And the girl was like, I don't understand that. Like, what? And so it was those types of things that I didn't realize I was surrounding myself with people who really secretly didn't even like me.
Right. Man, there's a theme, maybe you're aware of it, but just sitting here in this time with you, you can string along all these bad people, and you know who they are. You know their faces, their names, all the details of the abuse, be it verbal, physical, sexual, and sadly, I don't think it's all just the man that did the thing.
No,
there's girls in there, friends, family. There's just people that verbally didn't build you up. And it's like, when you go back and listen, because we will, right? There's these characters that are a string of good people in your life that seem to have the same message for you. Why are you tolerating this? Mm-hmm. You're better than this. And it all seems to be rooted in like boundaries, or drawing a line and saying like, no, no, no. And it just feels like the more you listen to those people, right? Like your daughter, the girl that was almost in the situation by way of your facilitation, and are like, the fuck is going on? And then I love that the story stopped there, that like it literally ended, that there's so much power in those boundaries. There's so much power in that declaration. Because here's the thing about most men and abusers, they're actually chicken shit. Yeah. Like they won't kill you. They're little bitches. They don't even have the balls to do it. And I'm not saying taunt them, like, for sure, kill me, but when it all comes down to it, they live in the gray area of abuse, which is control, right? Yeah. They're like, it's not like they really want to go to jail, or I mean, some are just cold-blooded killers, and we'll probably end up seeing them on a Netflix series, and hopefully I don't want to be part of that series. Right. Like, I'm not trying to be in that episode.
Thank you.
They can interview me if they need. Like, Bekah was a nice girl. She was on the podcast. The room. Yeah, like, okay, I accidentally gave the address for the studio. I'm sorry. You're an idiot. You gave the real address. It's like,
Suite 121.
Suite 121. Sorry. Oh my God. So I just would say, like, for whatever it's worth, as you keep on keeping on down this path, and you're on the up, and I'm up, and I'm up. Yeah. I was down and now up. Keep listening for that. Have ears for that. I think,
That's good.
I mean, even in our interactions, there's things that you've shared. I'm like, girl, go girl. No.
No.
Like, hell no.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not saying I have the room in your life for that, but like the people that are right in the fucking head can see that stuff a mile away and be like, girl, like, no. And sometimes it might come in the way of a freaking comment on your TikTok or whatever, you know? And I think like you're just getting started, and that's way cool. I'm a fan. I'm here for it. Good for you. Yeah, keep doing it.
Thank you.
It's really. Oh man, I know that there's so much more.
I know this
to
is
that.
like really heavy. I feel like it was a really heavy one, but I promise that it's a story of hope. It really
well, it is a story of hope, and
it really is.
You know, less people stop in the first like hour.
Right, I know. I was like, it was kind of a long.
Like, I hope you have a long commute. Hope traffic's bad today. So that you get to the end of the story.
Bad today, yeah.
But one of the things I do love about this space and my core podcast and episode 21, top 1%, what's up?
Yeah.
No big deal. Is that it's still unfolding. You know, like there, even if I go back to the 19 guests I've had, I'm like, ooh, I need to have them on episode 52, you know, so that I'm like, so what it is. And part of that is to keep each other accountable. You know, it keeps me going through the journey. I mean, I shared something today, but I'm sure there are a lot of people, you know, and you know, what's interesting too, and vulnerability tends to build off of each other. I actually shared that with a person this week in a private conversation in a certain context of abuse. And I won't go into that, but I just said, yeah, so this is something that happened to me. And then because it was sort of fresh and it was like, oh, I didn't like shut down and nobody thought different of me. And now it's like you build strength to strength. And that was like 2 or 3 days ago. So then I'm like, well, if you're going to share some crazy shit, I got to share some crazy shit too. You got some crazy shit, I got some crazy shit. You know? So, and I know it pales in comparison, but it's so important, I think, to have these conversations. I think people are.
And to see that people still love you, right? People still love me. People still love us, right? It's like, well, it feels like, because there's that voice in your head, right? That's like, I'm not, because of that, right? And you have to remind yourself that if somebody hears your story or sees it and they don't, and they have an issue, that's a them issue, not a me issue, right? And so like the blood of Jesus is big enough to cover anything and everything. And I know, like, I feel like there's somebody listening that feels like their thing is too big, right? Like there's somebody listening that's like, no, but I am the abuser, right? Or I was the abuser. I was the one that did this.
That's the craziest thing.
I worked in prison for years as a therapist with perpetrators, with the perpetrators, because I wanted to try to understand them. And I remember like really struggling with the Holy Spirit being like, God killed them all, you know?
Right.
And him being like, oh, so you mean that my grace is like, you deserve it so much more than they do? And I'm like, no, I don't, you know? Yeah. You mean I didn't? He's like, I love these people, you know? And I remember being like, why? You know, like, it's like one of those, but then it's like the nastiness that's on me is the same nastiness on them. Right. And so it's like, you know, just remembering that no matter what it is, that the grace of God is big enough to wash away all of it. And I think I shared this in the little thing where you were asking questions. I said, like, what makes you keep doing what you do? Yeah. And the Holy Spirit woke me up in the middle of the night and said, and gave me this vision of an ocean. And the ocean, you know, is so big, it's so vast. And he said, your pain has been wide. And I had this big, you know, vision of it. And he said, but your giving will be deep. And there was that, you know, just how deep, we don't even know how deep the ocean goes because we can't go that deep. Right. And so I recognized that, like, you know what, that our pain can give birth to purpose if we allow it to. Right. And so we can stay stuck, and I could never share these stories, or I can share them and be like, look what God has brought me through. To say, now I understand. And so when I see a girl act out or be like promiscuous or be whatever, I can see that and not judge her and be like, I understand that, because she thinks that's where her worth is, right? She sees that and she thinks that. And I still have to, like, you know, go back and be like, no, this is not who I am at different times in my life, right? And so just recognizing that the grace of Jesus, his blood is big enough for everything.
Oh, that's wonderful. I couple thoughts as we kind of conclude.
As we have to wrap up.
Yeah, right. I want to share. So one thing, I've had some conversations and this is delicate, like so nuanced. It's particularly around like a new beginning, a new creation, whether you do it all on your lonesome or you do it the way that we recognize, which I'm of the belief is really the only way to do it, which is through sanctification and through surrender and through salvation, frankly. And even if you're doing it the most Christian of ways, I accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior, like, or you're just like, I'm going to freaking lose this weight. There are parts of who you are prior to that moment that are great.
Yeah.
And I think what happens a lot of times is this moment occurs, this day of disgust, this day of decision. And then sometimes people throw the baby out with the bathwater and go like, oh, I have to discard and reject all of my past. And it's like, no, actually it's cool. Like you were pretty dope in that process. So there's a reason people liked you, and okay, maybe I can harness what was a skill used for, sin or used for negative acts, but now can be positive. And I think that's a hard thing to wrestle with too, right? Where you're like, but I kind of did like that part of me, even though it was dark.
Podcast on that. We could do a whole podcast.
It's a whole thing, right? Because a lot of people I watch them, I'm like, yo, don't be too Christian. like chill. It's not that great. Like Christianity's rough. Like it's you're signing up for a lens, like you said, a scales coming off your eyes, and there's parts of you that are still there, and it's not all bad. So that there's a lot more to that. And I think the other thing that comes to mind as you're sharing, kind of back to this imagery of the root systems in the trees, it's like every time you do something like this very podcast and sharing and feeling and holding the space, particularly with another human, it's like another root just grew down. You know what I mean? It's almost like it extended, so maybe it was here. I don't know if this is the surface, and then it's like I reinforced it. I have it anchored more, and it's a real living, breathing thing that you have to build, and you have to like do the work to carve the grooves in your brain and your heart, in the soil. And I'm gonna segue all of that because I would just be remiss. It would be crazy for us not to talk about the event that we're doing with Martha and with Ashley. So for our listeners, I know Bekah because of a relationship that I have with Ashley. Ashley and I met 10 years ago through a previous business, and we were both with the same company. And we kept in touch on social media, but mainly just from a distance. We got reconnected. And then it's my understanding that you guys are on a similar path in similar circles, speaking at similar events around entrepreneurship and leadership and trauma. And then you guys came together and said, hey, let's do an event called Unbound, which is September 12th through the 14th in Charlotte, North Carolina this year, in the year of our Lord, 2025.
That's right.
And it's my understanding that at first the event was for women.
Yeah.
And then you guys were like, or you gals, I should say, were like, hey, dudes have trauma too.
Yeah, men need this too.
And then somehow it's my understanding that Ashley was like, you were like, well, who would we be? So yeah, like then Ashley was like, I know a guy.
Yeah.
He's fucked up.
Yeah.
So like, let's get him to talk about it.
We knew, because they have amazing stories too. And we were like,
I'm going to have them on the podcast too.
Do what?
Laura's reaching out to them.
Great. Yeah. So they have amazing stories, and, we all have such similar story of healing and recognizing. We were like, okay, we have to do something. Like God brought us together for a reason. So we started that. And then we were like, you know what? They're like, dudes have trauma too. Like but we didn't want it to be one of those things where it's all like, fluffy and like emotional and all these things. So I was like, we need a man to speak to this, because men do deal with trauma differently, right? And your expectations of what you are and who you are and all of that. And so being a therapist, I was like, I feel like I can speak to that a little, but I'm still a woman, right? And so I was like, I feel like we have to have a man. And so we asked Ashley, and she was like, yeah, this guy would be perfect.
So you were like, who is the burliest, manliest man?
Yes, that's what we said, Nathan.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
And
that's
like,
exactly what
they
it
were
was.
like, I know a guy. I think he's in the dirt right
now.
Yeah,
eating steak raw.
Just eating meat.
That's right.
I'm gonna boost up my testosterone.
But we said we needed someone who wasn't like too metrosexual, but someone who was also going to still like,
but also
nice up there, you know,
right?
yeah, like we can't have somebody who's too rough, but also not too, like we had to be on somebody in the middle. But really we wanted someone who's going to be able to talk to the trauma in like a trauma informed way, but also still be able to appeal to the men, right?
Well, all jokes aside, I'm humbled to do it. I know it will stretch me, because I'm normally like Mr. Business, you know, like, let me tell you how to build a company out of nothing, and this is how you lead and culture, and I'll probably weave that in. So I would just say, like, if you're somebody that looks back over your life and goes, shit, like, how do I deal with that?
Yeah.
Which I think is a lot more people than, very few people get out of this life unscathed. And you're wanting to not just acknowledge it, but like harness it. Like you're saying, like, how do I actually morph this and transform this into like a secret weapon for good? And not just for the good of the world from a altruistic or virtuous place, but like for your good. Like what's in it for me?
And your
like
children.
And your children and like your family and like your community and like the people around you could actually benefit.
Yeah.
So for example, like I struggle with anger. Well, I've learned in some ways to channel that into intensity and into drive and into work ethic.
Yep.
And it's manifested so many amazing things in my life. It still has its underbelly that I have to deal with, and I pop off and I'm like, shit, you know, then I'm mad, you know? So like, I'm not suggesting that these things just go away, but I'm looking forward to unpacking at this event Unbound to be able to speak to these things in really real, raw, but even tactical, practical, applicable ways. So
I also want to say, even the people who don't have like crazy trauma stories, I want to speak to them real quick, because I think a lot of times I hear people in therapy say things like, well, I haven't had anything major happen. I haven't had any, like I haven't had rape, or I haven't had domestic violence or whatever, but there's still those little things that were taught to you throughout your life about what you believe about yourself, or, you know, what you believe about the world, or those kinds of things that, like you said, nobody gets out unscathed. So I just want to say that even if it's smaller things, or you're not believing in yourself, or you think you've hit a wall and you're like, I don't know how to become a different kind of person that I want to be, or whatever. Like, it's not just major trauma.
I couldn't agree more. And Bekah, I actually have a lot of respect is probably the word for people that have not had it too hard, because I don't know how they do it. Like, I'm like, where do you get your drive from? Where do you get your motivation from? Where do you get your like unique personality from? And I know that there's like God created them and they're unique, and but what I mean by that is like, I'm only funny because of my childhood trauma. Like, I mean, some people like, you just funny? Like, you're just a normal amount of funny. So the other piece there too, I think people should lean into that and, you know, come to the event, swipe up, link in bio, bitches, is we need you. Like those of us that got fucked up, like we need to be in relationship with you. It's your sort of stability and your even keel with our like warped view of the world that makes the world go round, you know. And I try to
that girl that stood up in high school, she probably had an easier, like, no trauma life, right? But and she saw that and was like, wait, this is really fucked up. Maybe we should walk away from this. And I remember being like, what do you mean we should walk away from this? This is a 20-something-year-old interested in us at 16. Like, what do you you know? So it's those moments of clarity. Yeah, I love that.
So it's gonna be powerful, and I'm gonna do an episode with both Martha and Ashley on the MyCore podcast, so that,
and we may even do one with all of us.
Oh yeah, no, we gotta figure out. There's room on the couch, right?
Yeah,
you gotta have them come here to Jacksonville. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
that'd be cool. So, hey, thank you, Bekah.
Thank you for having me.
I wasn't sure if we were ever gonna get out of that hole.
Just kept going down and down. I was like,
down. Damn, there's levels to this shit. This way. But really,
thank you for letting me be real and raw, though. Seriously, thank you.
Thank you. You know, I had as much fun as somebody can have in this context. And I know it's been an encouragement to our listeners. It's been an encouragement to me. And you're just in the top 1% in every sense of the word. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Awesome.